Halloween used to mean laughter, pumpkin pie, and my wife's cinnamon candles flickering on the kitchen counter. It used to mean warmth, the kind that pulls a family together. But now, Halloween feels different. Cold. Empty. My name's Anthony Miller, and this is the night everything changed. Welcome back, my beautiful friends. If you're ready to get lost in today's story, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I've got another story waiting for you, and trust me, you don't want to miss that one. Now let's begin. I can still remember the way the leaves crunched under my boots as I walked up the driveway to my son's new home in Salem, Massachusetts. The place looked beautiful, soft lights glowing in the windows, pumpkins carved with perfect smiles, children running down the street in costumes. For anyone else, it would have been a perfect night. For me, it was the night my family turned into strangers. Nolan had invited me over for a family Halloween dinner. His text message had been short, almost formal: "Dinner's at 7, Dad. Emily's excited to have you." I'd helped him pay for this house just last year, put down part of the down payment from my retirement savings because I wanted to see him and Emily start their lives right. It made me proud then. But standing at his front door that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. When the door opened, Emily's smile was polite, not warm. She wore one of those neat orange sweaters, her hair tied up, every move precise, like someone performing hospitality instead of feeling it. "Anthony," she said brightly. "So glad you could make it." I smiled, trying to sound cheerful. "Wouldn't miss it." Inside, the house smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and the faint trace of a new candle, probably one of those pumpkin spice ones. Everything looked perfect: a long wooden table set for 12, glowing candles, Halloween decorations just right. And there, sitting at the head of the table, was Adrian Kane, Emily's father. I hadn't known he'd be there. He was dressed in a dark blazer, silver hair combed back, a gold ring glinting on his finger. He was one of those men who filled the room just by existing. Smooth talker, always confident, the kind of man who could make anyone feel small if he wanted to. "Anthony," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're early. Always the punctual one, aren't you?" "Old habits," I said. He raised his wine glass. "Well, some habits are worth breaking." I forced a polite smile, but his tone left a mark. Guests began arriving, friends of Emily's, a few neighbors I didn't know. They all filled the room with laughter and conversation, and for a while, I tried to blend in. But as I looked around the table, something started to bother me. There were name cards on every plate: Emily, Adrian, Nolan, Tracy, Paul, even Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins from next door. But not one had my name. I stood there for a second, pretending to check my phone so no one would notice me searching. Maybe it was a mistake, I told myself. Maybe Emily just forgot. Finally, I spotted the only empty seat left, right beside Nolan. That had to be mine. I started walking toward it, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. But just as I reached the chair, Nolan stood up quickly, blocking my path. "Dad," he said under his breath, "that seat's taken." I blinked. "Taken? By who?" He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's for my father-in-law." He gestured toward Adrian, who was busy pouring himself another glass of wine. My stomach tightened. "You mean I'm not sitting with the family?" Nolan rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, please, it's just, we don't have enough chairs. You can sit over there." He pointed to the far end of the room, a small stool next to the window, half a step away from the table. The room suddenly felt smaller. The laughter around me seemed louder, sharper. I tried to smile, hoping he'd see how much this hurt and take it back. But instead, he sighed and said softly, "Dad, please. Don't make a scene." And then, as if to seal the humiliation, he placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed me gently aside. "This seat is for my father-in-law. Get out of the way." It wasn't harsh, not loud, but the weight of it crushed something inside me. For a second, no one spoke. I could feel every eye in the room on me, yet no one said a word. Emily busied herself with the wine. Adrian smiled slightly, enjoying every second. I nodded once, quietly, and stepped back. My throat felt dry. I took the stool by the window. From there, I could see my reflection in the glass, a tired old man sitting apart from his own blood. They laughed, toasted, and passed dishes around the table while I sat silently, pretending to eat. Adrian leaned back in his chair, telling one of his polished stories, about some business deal or vacation, I can't even remember. Every time he spoke, Nolan laughed just a little too hard. Every sound in that room pressed against me like a weight. But beneath that quiet humiliation, something stirred. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was realization, the kind that creeps in when you finally stop making excuses for the people you love. When dinner ended, I thanked Emily for the meal and slipped out quietly. Nobody stopped me. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. The wind rustled through the leaves, scattering them across the driveway. I stood there for a long time, staring at the warm light spilling from the windows. From the outside, it looked like a perfect family dinner. But from where I stood, it was the night I became invisible. That night, as I drove home through empty streets, I thought of Catherine, my wife, and how she used to say, "The truth always knocks twice, Anthony." First soft, then loud. That dinner was the soft knock. The loud one was coming. I parked in my driveway, sat in silence, and looked at my hands, the same hands that built that house, paid those bills, held that family together. And for the first time in my life, I felt something new, a quiet, steady fire in my chest. That night, something inside me broke, I whispered. And something else woke up. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved so deeply that you didn't even recognize them anymore? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent except for the creak of the old floorboards. I made coffee, but it tasted bitter, just like the memory of that dinner. Every sound from last night replayed in my head, the laughter, Adrian's smug tone, Nolan's voice telling me not to make a scene. I kept asking myself, when did my son stop seeing me as his father and start treating me like a burden? By mid-morning I couldn't sit still. I told myself I only wanted to talk to him, to clear the air. But deep down, I wanted to look him in the eyes and understand what had changed. I drove back to his house in Salem. The neighborhood looked different in daylight, quiet, tidy, nothing like the world I felt inside. I parked down the street, rehearsing what I'd say. Be calm, Anthony. Don't accuse. Just ask. When I reached the porch, I heard voices through the door. I froze. Emily's voice came first, quick and anxious. He's starting to notice, Adrian. You can't keep showing up like this. Then a man's voice, Adrian's, calm and sure. Relax. The old man doesn't suspect a thing. He's harmless. Old man. Harmless. I leaned closer, heart pounding. Emily whispered, what if Nolan finds out? Adrian laughed quietly. He already knows. He's part of this, remember? For a moment I forgot to breathe. My own son, part of what? My fingers trembled against the doorknob. I wanted to barge in, to demand answers, but instinct told me to listen instead. Emily said, you promised this would be done by Christmas. I can't keep lying to him. Adrian replied, you'll do fine. Nolan trusts you, and once the paperwork's finished, we're all set. He gets security. I get control. Paperwork. Control. A cold sweat broke down my neck. Whatever they were planning, I wasn't just excluded, I was being used. Then my shoe brushed against a loose porch plank. It snapped under my weight with a sharp crack. The voices stopped. A second later the door swung open, and there stood Adrian, smiling like he'd just expected a guest. Anthony. Out for an early stroll? He didn't look surprised, not even a little. I forced a thin smile. Couldn't sleep. His eyes were steady. "You should try chamomile. Works wonders for old nerves." "Where's Nolan?" I asked. He stepped aside. Nolan appeared behind him, face pale, eyes downcast. He looked tired, not guilty, just beaten. "Dad," he said quietly, "it's not a good time." "Not a good time?" I repeated. "I just wanted to talk." Adrian clapped a hand on Nolan's shoulder. "Your father worries too much, son. Let's give him a rest day, shall we?" The way he said "your father," like I was a stranger standing on their porch, made something twist inside me. I looked directly at Nolan. "Is this true? You're part of something?" He shook his head quickly, eyes darting to Adrian. "Dad, please, just go home. I'll call you later." He wouldn't meet my eyes again. I turned away before they could see the heat in mine. As I walked back to my car, I heard the door close softly behind me, like the sound of a lock clicking shut between us. I drove aimlessly through town for hours. Every building I passed blurred together, grocery stores, gas stations, the same cafe where Catherine and I used to stop for pie. I ended up at the park by the river, the one where Nolan learned to ride his bike. I sat there until the sun went down. When I finally went home, I couldn't eat. Couldn't think straight. I just kept replaying their words: paperwork, control, he already knows. By the next morning, the anger had turned into something else: determination. I needed answers, and I knew someone who could help me find them. Detective Ryan Cole. We'd worked together years ago at the steel mill before he joined the Salem Police Department. After retirement, he kept consulting on small cases, mostly insurance work. If anyone could quietly check into Adrian's background, it was Ryan. I called him, and he agreed to meet at his usual spot, a diner off Lafayette Street. When I walked in, he was already there, stirring his coffee. His hair had gone gray since I'd last seen him, but his eyes were still sharp. "Tony," he said, "you sound rattled on the phone. What's going on?" I told him everything: the dinner, the missing seat, the conversation I'd overheard, how Adrian seemed to have some kind of hold over Nolan. Ryan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You think he's after money?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But something's wrong. He's not just some pushy father-in-law. He's strategic." Ryan nodded slowly. "All right. Give me a couple of days. I'll run his name through some databases I still have access to." For the first time since that dinner, I felt a small spark of hope. 2 days later, Ryan called. His voice was tight. "Anthony, you'd better sit down." I did. He said, "I found records linking Adrian to financial transfers connected to Nolan and Emily. The insurance money from Catherine's policy, it's gone from your account." My chest tightened. Gone? I never touched that account. I turned away before they could see the heat in mine. As I walked back to my car, I heard the door close softly behind me, like the sound of a lock clicking shut between us. I drove aimlessly through town for hours. Every building I passed blurred together, grocery stores, gas stations, the same cafe where Catherine and I used to stop for pie. I ended up at the park by the river, the one where Nolan learned to ride his bike. I sat there until the sun went down. When I finally went home, I couldn't eat. Couldn't think straight. I just kept replaying their words: paperwork, control, he already knows. By the next morning, the anger had turned into something else: determination. I needed answers, and I knew someone who could help me find them. Detective Ryan Cole. We'd worked together years ago at the steel mill before he joined the Salem Police Department. After retirement, he kept consulting on small cases, mostly insurance work. If anyone could quietly check into Adrian's background, it was Ryan. I called him, and he agreed to meet at his usual spot, a diner off Lafayette Street. When I walked in, he was already there, stirring his coffee. His hair had gone gray since I'd last seen him, but his eyes were still sharp. "Tony," he said, "you sound rattled on the phone. What's going on?" I told him everything, the dinner, the missing seat, the conversation I'd overheard, how Adrian seemed to have some kind of hold over Nolan. Ryan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You think he's after money?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But something's wrong. He's not just some pushy father-in-law. He's strategic." Ryan nodded slowly. "All right. Give me a couple of days. I'll run his name through some databases I still have access to." For the first time since that dinner, I felt a small spark of hope. 2 days later, Ryan called. His voice was tight. "Anthony, you'd better sit down." I did. He said, "I found records linking Adrian to financial transfers connected to Nolan and Emily. The insurance money from Catherine's policy, it's gone from your account." My chest tightened. Gone? I never touched that account. For 3 nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dinner table, Adrian sitting where I should have been, my son smiling beside him like it was normal. The sound of their laughter had burned itself into my mind. By the 4th morning, I decided waiting wasn't enough. If Ryan's discovery was just the beginning, I needed to know how far Adrian's hand had reached. I started with the bank. When I walked into Salem First Credit Union, the teller smiled politely. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. How can I help you?" "I need a printout of my account, last 12 months. Every transaction." She tapped on her keyboard, then frowned slightly. "Just to confirm, are you referring to account number ending in 4210? I nodded. She typed a bit more, then looked uneasy. "Sir, that account is listed as closed. 6 months ago." "Closed?" I repeated, my voice catching. "That's impossible." She handed me a printout. My name was on the first line, but next to it, in smaller text, secondary authorization, A. Kane. Adrian Kane. My stomach turned cold. The teller lowered her voice. "There's a withdrawal record, a full balance transfer to an offshore account. Cayman Bank in Trust. It's labeled as estate consolidation." Estate. That was Catherine's life insurance. The safety she'd left behind for Nolan. I thanked her, walked out with the papers in my hand, and sat in my car for nearly an hour. The papers shook in my grip. Every signature looked like mine, but the dates didn't match. Someone had forged my name, clean and deliberate. I wasn't just being pushed out emotionally, I was being erased legally. That evening, I called Nolan. He didn't pick up. I left a message anyway. "Son, we need to talk. It's about money. About your mother." No reply. I called again the next morning, nothing. So I drove to his house, not out of anger but something deeper, a need to understand whether my son was lost or complicit. Emily answered the door this time. Her expression tightened when she saw me. "Anthony, now's not good." "Where's Nolan?" "He's at work." "Then I'll wait." Her jaw set. "Please don't make this hard." Something about her tone stopped me. It wasn't just annoyance, it was fear. I leaned closer. "Emily, I know Adrian took money that wasn't his. I have proof. I just need Nolan to hear me out." She hesitated, eyes darting behind her as if someone might be listening. Finally, she whispered, "You shouldn't be here. Adrian doesn't like surprises." That sentence told me everything. I stepped back slowly. "You're scared of him." She didn't answer. Before I could say anything else, a car pulled into the driveway, a sleek black BMW. Adrian stepped out, sunglasses on, smile perfectly in place. Well, he said smoothly. "If it isn't the proud father again." "Couldn't stay away?" Emily froze, backing up toward the door. I forced a calm voice. "We need to talk." He smirked. "We already did, Anthony. At dinner. Remember? This isn't about dinner. It's about my wife's insurance money. You forged my signature. For the first time, his smile faltered just slightly, then returned, sharper. "That's a serious accusation," he said lightly. "You might want to be careful throwing those around." "Careful?" I said. "You stole from me. From my family." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive, strong, suffocating. "Anthony," he said quietly, "you're tired. Confused. Maybe you should rest instead of chasing ghosts." My fists clenched. "I'm not confused." "Then prove it," he whispered, smiling again. "Go ahead. Show everyone. But remember, people listen to youth, not to old men with stories. You'll only embarrass yourself." He brushed past me, walked inside, and closed the door. The sound echoed like a verdict. I stood there for a long time before finally walking back to my car. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. He thought I was weak. He thought my silence was submission. But he was wrong. That night, I went to Ryan's house. He lived in a small place on the edge of town, cluttered with old case files and photographs from his police days. When he opened the door, I handed him the bank documents. "You were right. He's after the money. But this isn't just fraud, he's taken control of Nolan's life." Ryan scanned the pages, whistling under his breath. "This is bad. He's smart. He's using legal angles to cover the theft." "I want everything you can find on him," I said. "Every address, every alias, every record." Ryan nodded. "Give me 48 hours. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I went through old family albums, trying to remember where the shift began, when Nolan started listening to Adrian more than me. Maybe it happened slowly, after Catherine's death. Maybe Adrian saw an opening when grief made us vulnerable. I thought of Catherine's voice again, soft but certain, "The truth always knocks twice." This time, I was ready to answer. Late on the second evening, Ryan called. "Anthony," he said, "I think I found something. Adrian Kane doesn't exist." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean he doesn't exist?" "There's no record of him before 2008. No birth certificate, no social security trace before that year. But there's a record of someone else, same date of birth, similar photo, named Marcus Ellery. He changed his name after a fraud conviction." For a moment, all sound vanished from the room. "Marcus Ellery," I repeated. Ryan said, "Yeah. And here's the kicker, he's listed as an executor for 3 estates that mysteriously lost funds under administrative error. Each case involved families connected through marriage." Sound familiar? Everything clicked at once. The manipulation, the control, the confidence. Adrian wasn't just a toxic father-in-law, he was a con artist. "Ryan," I said, my voice calm but burning inside, "keep digging. I want everything." He hesitated. "Anthony, whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning," I interrupted. "I'm preparing." When I hung up, I looked around my quiet house, the same walls Catherine had painted, the same furniture we'd chosen together. For the first time in years, I felt her presence again. I whispered to her photo, "You were right, love. The truth knocked twice. Now it's my turn to open the door." I knew what had to be done. I wasn't just going to confront Adrian, or Marcus, or whatever name he hid behind. I was going to expose him completely. He'd taken my seat, my savings, my son. Now I was going to take back everything he'd built on my pain. When Ryan told me the man living under my son's roof wasn't Adrian Kane but Marcus Ellery, something in me shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was focus. I stopped reacting and started planning. For the next few days, I played the part of a quiet, retired father, the kind of man people overlook. But behind closed doors, I was collecting pieces. Ryan sent me a folder of documents, addresses, fake companies, property listings. One listing caught my attention immediately, the deed to Nolan's house. The signature line read, "Property transferred to Adrian Kane, sole holder of legal ownership." And below that, a single date burned through me, 3 days before that Halloween dinner. I sat there staring at the paper, my hand trembling. My son's home, the one I helped him buy, the one he'd proudly shown me, was no longer his. How could Nolan not know? Or worse, did he know? I needed to see it myself. That evening, I drove to the Essex County Records office. The clerk on duty was a young guy with kind eyes and a stack of paperwork that looked taller than him. I gave him the address and waited as he typed. He frowned at the screen. Looks like ownership was transferred last month. New deed holder, Adrian Kane. I took a slow breath. Can I see the original filing? He hesitated. Technically, those are public records, so yes. He handed me a thin folder. Inside was a single document with 2 signatures, Nolan's and Adrian's. The ink still looked fresh. Under Nolan's name were the words, "Transfer of ownership in exchange for financial consolidation and trust protection." I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just Adrian stealing, it was Nolan giving it away. But the wording didn't sound like Nolan. My son barely knew what trust consolidation meant. Someone had told him it was a good idea, someone he trusted. I copied the document and thanked the clerk. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. Outside, I sat in the car, the night pressing in around me. My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "Be careful, Tony. Men like him don't play fair." I typed back, "Neither do fathers with nothing left to lose." The next morning, I parked outside Nolan's office building. I waited until lunchtime before walking in, calm and quiet. His coworkers waved politely, they all knew me from past visits. He looked surprised to see me. "Dad? What are you doing here?" I handed him the copied deed. "You tell me." He skimmed the page, brow furrowing. "Yeah, that's the trust paperwork Adrian helped me file." "What about it?" "Look closer," I said. "It's not a trust. It's a transfer. You signed away your own house." He looked again, confusion turning into disbelief. "No," he said, "it was for security. In case anything happened to me." "Security for who?" I asked quietly. "You or him?" He went pale. "That can't be right." I leaned forward. "Nolan, listen to me, that man isn't Adrian Kane. His real name is Marcus Ellery. He's been using you, using Emily, using us." He shook his head. "Dad, stop. You've got it wrong. He's helped us, I slammed my hand on the table. "He's a criminal, Nolan. He's been stealing from families for years." The room went still. Nolan stared at me, anger and confusion fighting behind his eyes. "You're just jealous," he muttered. "You can't stand that someone else is helping me now." My chest tightened. "Jealous? You think I make this up?" He stood abruptly, voice rising. "You've always hated him." I didn't argue. I just left the papers on his desk and walked away. Sometimes the truth doesn't land until it breaks something first. That night, I sat alone on my porch. The wind was sharp, carrying the sound of trick-or-treaters in the distance. Somewhere down the street, a father was laughing with his kids, helping them sort candy. I remembered doing that with Nolan once. How did we get here? I looked at the copy of the deed again, tracing the signature with my finger. That's when I noticed something strange, the notary stamp. It was dated on a Sunday. County offices don't operate on Sundays. That meant only one thing, forgery. The realization hit like lightning. Adrian, Marcus, had faked the notarization to make it look legitimate. He wasn't just manipulating Nolan, he was committing a crime under his name. I called Ryan immediately. He whistled low. "That's your proof, Tony. With that date, I can get a warrant request started. But it might take time." "Don't bother," I said quietly. "I'll get him to confess." Ryan sighed. "Don't do anything stupid." "Stupid?" I said. "No. Just overdue. The next day, I followed Adrian. He met someone at a cafe near the courthouse, a man in a gray suit. I stayed outside, watching through the window. The man handed him a folder. Adrian flipped through it, smiling. I couldn't hear their words, but I could read Adrian's lips when he said one thing: the old man's money cleared. Old man. That was me. He signed another paper, shook the man's hand, and left. I waited a few minutes, then went inside and slipped the waiter a 20. That man who just left, do you know his name? The waiter shrugged. Regular customer. Calls himself Mr. Kane. Always tips big. Did he leave anything behind? The waiter checked the table and handed me a napkin. Just this. It had a single note scribbled on it: meeting Friday, finalized transfer. Transfer. Again. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. It wasn't enough that he'd stolen my money in my son's home, he was still moving pieces, finishing something. I folded the napkin, slid it into my pocket, and walked out. My reflection in the window looked different now, calmer, colder. Adrian thought he was writing the last chapter of my life. But he'd just given me the first line of his downfall. If you were in my place and discovered proof that your own family was being used in a scam, would you go straight to the police, or handle it yourself? Let me know what you think in the comments. I hadn't been inside the attic since Catherine passed. Dust clung to the rafters, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Every box held a memory I hadn't been brave enough to face: her journals, her paintings, the recipes she'd copied in her careful handwriting. But after what I'd learned about Adrian, or Marcus, I needed to look through everything she'd left. Catherine always had a way of sensing danger long before it arrived. I found the box marked personal letters. Most were old birthday cards and Christmas notes. But at the bottom, taped shut with yellowing masking tape, was a small envelope with my name written in her handwriting. Anthony, to be opened only if you ever lose faith in Nolan. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter and a photograph of Nolan as a boy, sitting on Catherine's lap, both smiling. I unfolded the letter and began to read. My love, if you're reading this, it means something between you and Nolan has gone wrong. And I want you to remember something before anger blinds you: Adrian Kane is not who he says he is. He came to us years ago, offering to help with Nolan's mortgage when we struggled after my illness. But he used Nolan's name to cover his own debt. I found proof, but I didn't have the strength to confront him. Please, forgive Nolan if he ever hurts you, he's caught in Adrian's web. I stopped reading for a moment, my eyes blurring. Catherine knew. She'd known all along. Anthony, the letter continued, you've always been the protector. But sometimes protection doesn't mean fighting, it means seeing clearly. If Adrian is still around, don't try to destroy him with anger. Destroy him with truth. And remember, Nolan still loves you. Even if he forgets how to show it. The paper shook in my hands. Catherine hadn't just warned me, she'd given me a map. Everything fell into place. The forged documents. The manipulation. The fear in Emily's eyes. Adrian had been controlling my son for years, using guilt and authority like chains. I sat there for a long time, the letter pressed against my chest. All this time, I thought I'd lost my son. But what I'd really lost was my sight. I'd been fighting the wrong enemy. When I finally went downstairs, I poured a glass of water and sat by the window, staring out at the fading light. For the first time in weeks, the anger inside me felt quiet, replaced by clarity. If Nolan was a victim, then saving him wasn't just about revenge. It was redemption. I picked up the phone and called Ryan. He answered on the second ring. Yeah, Tony? I found something, I said. A letter from Catherine. She knew about him. About everything. Ryan exhaled sharply. You're kidding. No. She warned me. Adrian's been forging Nolan's name since the start. I think Nolan doesn't even realize how deep it goes. Ryan's voice softened. That explains a lot. You're not dealing with just a fraud, Tony. You're dealing with a manipulator. A psychological one. I looked down at the letter again. Catherine said to destroy him with truth. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Ryan paused. You've got a plan? Not yet, I said. But I'm getting there. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Catherine's letter beside me. I opened my notebook and wrote at the top of a new page. Phase 1, proof. If I was going to expose Adrian, I couldn't rely on emotion. I needed evidence, cold, undeniable facts. I spent the next 2 days collecting everything I could: bank printouts, photos from the cafe meeting, notes from Ryan's findings. I recorded voice memos, even practiced how I'd confront him. But I also started noticing something strange. Everywhere I went, a gray sedan appeared nearby, parked across the street, idling near the grocery store, following just far enough behind to stay unnoticed. The first time, I dismissed it. The second time, I memorized the license plate. Ryan ran the number for me. It's registered to a shell company linked to one of Adrian's fake firms, he said. He's watching you, Tony. I smiled faintly. Good. That means he's nervous. That night, I turned off all the lights and sat by the window, waiting. Around midnight, the sedan rolled slowly past the house, headlights dimmed. I whispered to Catherine's photo, he's scared, love. That means we're close. 2 days later, Nolan showed up unannounced. He looked different, tired, defeated. Dad, he said quietly, standing in the doorway. I got your message about the house. You were right. The lawyer confirmed the transfer wasn't what Adrian said it was. I didn't speak. I just nodded, letting him continue. He rubbed his face. I don't know how I could have been so stupid. Emily's been crying non-stop. She's scared of him. I walked over, placed the letter from Catherine in his hands. Your mother saw it before we did. You were never stupid, son. You were trapped. He read silently, then looked up, eyes wet. She knew? She did, I said softly. And now we do too. He nodded slowly, resolve forming behind his tears. What do we do now? I looked out the window. Now, we stop letting him write our story. Nolan clenched his fists. I want to help. You will, I said. But not yet. First, we make sure he can't touch either of us again. As he left that night, he hugged me for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Dad. I put a hand on his shoulder. You've got nothing to be sorry for. You just woke up. After he drove off, I looked again at Catherine's letter. She'd said to destroy him with truth. But now I had more than truth, I had purpose. The next phase wasn't about proving who Adrian was. It was about taking everything he'd built and turning it against him. He wanted control. I'd give him chaos. What would you do if you found out someone had been controlling your family from the shadows? Forgive, confront, or destroy their influence piece by piece? I'd love to hear your thoughts. The letter from Catherine changed everything. It wasn't just proof of Adrian's deceit, it was a compass. For the first time in months, I wasn't stumbling through anger. I was moving with intent. If Adrian, or Marcus Ellery, wanted control, I was going to hand him the illusion of it. I'd let him think he was still winning, right up until the moment he fell. The plan started small. Ryan helped me create copies of every forged document, notarized with today's date. If Adrian ever tried to claim them again, we'd have time-stamped proof of the fraud. But that wasn't enough. I needed to expose him on a stage he couldn't walk away from. I began documenting everything. I planted a small camera in the attic above my living room light fixture, one of those devices sold for home security. Then I set up a backup recording on my phone, hidden behind a photo frame. Adrian's arrogance was his weakness. He'd never imagine an old man like me could outthink him. 2 nights later, I received an unexpected call. Anthony, Adrian said smoothly, I hear you've been talking to Nolan. Dangerous habit, stirring up confusion. You wouldn't want to make things worse, would you? I let my voice stay calm. We're family. Talking is what families do. True, he replied. But some conversations should be left alone. Nolan's in a fragile place. I'd hate for your relationship to suffer any further. That subtle threat hung in the air. I'll take that under advisement, I said, then ended the call. I sat there staring at the phone, realizing just how deep his manipulation went. He wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing loyalty. But the moment he called me, he'd made a mistake. He was rattled. And rattled men make noise. Ryan met me at my house the next morning. He brought coffee and a folder. Tony, I've got something big, he said, setting the papers down. Inside were copies of financial transfers, money funneled through 3 shell accounts linked to Ellery Holdings, a company Adrian used as a front. These dates line up with your withdrawals, Ryan explained. He's been moving your money, Emily's inheritance, and even Nolan's business funds under different aliases. I stared at the pages. So he's been setting up to disappear. Ryan nodded. He's close to pulling the plug, Tony. Once that final transfer happens, he'll vanish, and the trail will go cold. I leaned back, thinking. When's the last recorded transfer date? Ryan pointed to the sheet. October 31st. This Friday. Halloween. Again. I almost laughed, bitterly. He started his game that night. He's going to end it on the same one. Ryan frowned. Tony, don't tell me you're planning something risky. I smiled faintly. Not risky. Just poetic. The next few days were preparation. I rehearsed every step of the plan in my head like clockwork. First, I reconnected with Emily. I found her at the local park with her daughter, Harper, my granddaughter. When she saw me, she hesitated but didn't walk away. Emily, I said quietly, you don't have to be afraid anymore. I know what he's done. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean for any of this, Anthony. He said it was to protect Nolan. I didn't know about the money or the papers. I nodded. You don't have to explain. But I need your help now. Just one thing, convince Adrian that I'm coming to dinner on Halloween. Make it sound like I'm desperate to make peace. She looked up, uncertain. Why? Because he needs to think I'm finished fighting. That's when he'll relax. She nodded slowly. Okay. I can do that. When she walked away, I felt a flicker of guilt, dragging her back into the mess, but there was no other choice. Adrian needed to be surrounded by his lies when they burned down. That night, I met with Nolan. He looked nervous, restless. You sure this will work? He asked. I handed him a USB drive. On here are recordings of Adrian's calls, fake documents, and photos of his meetings. You'll keep it safe. If anything happens to me, Ryan knows what to do. He stared at me, realization dawning. You're setting him up. I nodded. He's been setting me up for months. Time he tasted his own medicine. Nolan hesitated. Dad, what if he gets violent? I looked him in the eye. Then I'll remind him what it feels like to underestimate someone who's lost everything. He didn't argue after that. Over the next few days, I left breadcrumbs, deliberate ones. I made calls Adrian could trace, checked property records under my name again, even mentioned to Emily that I was finally giving up. By Thursday evening, Ryan called to confirm. Our friend moved another $50,000 into a new account today. He's almost ready to cash out. Perfect, I said. Friday night will be his last dinner. Ryan sighed. You're sure you don't want backup? Not yet, I replied. This isn't police business, not until I say so. When Friday came, I woke early. The morning air felt colder than usual, heavy with expectation. I cleaned the house, ironed a shirt, and packed the evidence folder in my briefcase. That night, I drove to Nolan's house. The same one I'd stood outside of weeks ago, humiliated and heartbroken. Now, it felt like a battlefield waiting for its final move. Emily met me at the door. "He's here," she whispered. "He thinks you came to apologize." "Good," I said. "Let him think that." The table was set, candles flickering, just like last time. Adrian sat at the head again, smiling confidently. "Well," he said, raising his glass, "the prodigal father returns." I must admit, I didn't expect this. I smiled back, calm and steady. I figured it was time to mend things. He leaned forward. "Wise choice. Pride doesn't suit everyone." "Neither does theft," I said softly. He froze for just a second, then chuckled. Always with the accusations. But I saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He knew I had something. He just didn't know how much. The rest of dinner was quiet. I played along, keeping my tone mild, my posture humble. But inside, the trap was already closing. As I stood to leave, I looked at Nolan and said, "Next time, son, let's sit together." Then I turned to Adrian. "You've always loved Halloween, haven't you? Masks and all." He frowned, uncertain. "Enjoy the night," I said. "It's going to be your last one as Adrian Kane." And I walked out, leaving him to choke on his own confusion. If you were Anthony, would you let the law take its course, or would you handle justice your own way, like he's planning to? Drop your answer below. The morning after that dinner, I barely slept. Every second replayed in my mind Adrian's smirk, his calm arrogance, the flicker in his eyes when I mentioned masks. He knew I was up to something, but he couldn't tell what. That uncertainty was my advantage. I was sipping black coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ryan. "Tony," he said quickly, "we got confirmation. You were right about the name. Adrian Kane doesn't exist in any official registry beyond 2009. I frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning the real Adrian Kane died 12 years ago, car accident, Chicago. The man in your son's house is using a dead man's identity. His real name is Marcus Ellery. He's been running scams from Illinois to Texas for decades. He changes cities, uses charm, fake business deals, and family connections. You're not his first victim." For a moment, everything went quiet. Marcus Ellery. That name sounded like a curse. "Can we prove it?" I asked. "Absolutely," Ryan said. "I've got the fingerprints and the financial trail. But listen, you need to be careful. If he knows we're onto him, he'll bolt." "He won't bolt," I said, setting my coffee down. "Not yet." "Tony, what are you planning?" I smiled faintly. "I'm planning to give him what he's been pretending to own, the spotlight." That day, I called Nolan and Emily over. They looked nervous but determined. "We have his real name," I told them. "Marcus Ellery. Everything he's told you, the background, the credentials, even the charity stories, all lies." Emily gasped. "Oh my God. Nolan, he's been living in our house under a dead man's name." Nolan's face turned pale. "Dad, how is that possible?" "We've signed papers, met his lawyer." "His lawyer's fake too," I said. "A man on his payroll who notarized false transfers." Nolan sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "He's taken everything from us." I stepped closer, placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, son. He took control. We're taking it back." Emily wiped her eyes. "How?" "By letting him hang himself," I said. "He's already set the stage for his next move, that final transfer on Halloween. We'll be there. And so will Ryan's team." Over the next 2 days, we built the case like a fortress. Ryan gathered every piece of digital proof, I organized physical copies. Nolan hid small cameras around his house, under the dining table, above the mantel, and near the light fixture. Emily rehearsed her part, act as though nothing had changed, play the loyal daughter. By Thursday night, everything was ready. The house looked normal. The wine glasses were polished, the table was set. From the outside, it would look like a perfect family dinner. Inside, it would be Marcus Ellery's downfall. Friday morning, Halloween. The sky was gray, the air thick with the smell of rain. I woke before dawn and sat in Catherine's chair by the window, reading her letter one last time. Destroy him with truth. Those words pulsed through my mind. I picked up my briefcase, filled with copies of forged deeds, bank transfers, and the Chicago death certificate of the real Adrian Kane. That was my weapon. Around noon, Ryan called again. We'll be stationed 2 blocks away, Tony. Once you get him talking, I'll move in with the warrant. Make sure the cameras are ready, I said. The world deserves to see who he really is. Ryan hesitated. You sound calm. I've been waiting too long to lose my nerve now. By late afternoon, I drove to Nolan's house. As I turned the corner, I saw Marcus's silver car already parked out front. He was early, as always when he thought he was in control. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. Emily moved quietly in the kitchen, setting plates. Nolan stood by the window, eyes fixed on the driveway. You ready? I asked him. He nodded. Ready to end it. Good, I said. Just remember, let him talk first. He'll hang himself faster than we ever could. When Marcus walked in, his confidence filled the room like perfume. Well, this is a surprise, he said smoothly. Didn't expect a second invitation so soon. I smiled faintly. Family deserves second chances, don't you think? He took his seat at the head of the table again. Emily poured him wine, her hands trembling slightly. So, Marcus said, raising his glass, shall we start fresh? Absolutely, I replied. Though, before we toast, I'd like to say a few words. He leaned back, amused. By all means. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This, I said, sliding it across the table, is a death certificate. He frowned. And why should I care about that? Because it belongs to Adrian Kane, I said. The real one. For the first time since I'd met him, Marcus's face lost its composure. His jaw tensed, his hand froze around the wine glass. I continued, my voice steady. He died in Chicago, 12 years ago. Which makes you, what? An admirer? Or just a thief borrowing another man's skin? Nolan's breathing quickened. Emily's hands clutched the tablecloth. Marcus tried to laugh it off. Anthony, you've really lost it. That's absurd. I leaned forward. Then why do your fingerprints match Marcus Ellery's? Why does the bank trail lead back to your old company in Dallas? He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I do, I said quietly. A man who's finally out of names to hide behind. He froze again, eyes darting to the hallway, calculating an exit. But outside, Ryan's car had already pulled up. For a long second, no one spoke. You could almost hear the lies collapsing in the silence. Then Nolan said softly, Who are you really, Marcus? Marcus looked at him, and for a split moment, I saw something human in his face. Fear. But it was too late for fear. If you discovered someone close to your family had been living under a false identity for years, what would you do first? Confront them, expose them, or walk away? I'd love to hear your answer. Halloween night arrived like a memory that refused to fade. The air was sharp, full of distant laughter and the echo of children's costumes brushing the pavement. But inside Nolan's house, there was no laughter, only tension. Everything was set exactly as before. The table. The wine. The flickering candles. The same chair where my son had once told me to get out. Only this time, I wasn't walking in as a humiliated father. I was walking in as the man holding every card. Emily greeted me at the door, whispering, He's here. He thinks you're ready to apologize. Good, I said. Let him think that. Nolan stood in the corner, stiff and silent. His eyes met mine, and I gave him a small nod. He knew what was about to happen, and what it would cost. Marcus, still pretending to be Adrian Kane, sat at the head of the table, dressed neatly in a navy blazer. His expression carried that familiar arrogance, polished and dangerous. "Well, look who decided to show up again," he said smoothly. "I must admit, Anthony, I wasn't expecting reconciliation. But I welcome it." I smiled, calm and steady. "You always were good at pretending to welcome things, Marcus." His smirk faltered, just slightly. "Excuse me?" I took my seat across from him, unfolding a napkin like nothing was wrong. "Do you know what I've realized, Marcus? Truth is a lot like Halloween candy, the sweetest part comes when you unwrap it." He chuckled nervously. "You really should let go of this fantasy, old man." I nodded to Nolan. "Son, could you get the lights, please?" Nolan hesitated, then flipped the switch. The chandelier flickered, and a faint mechanical hum filled the room. A second later, Marcus's own voice echoed through hidden speakers, clear, confident, and incriminating. "Once the money clears, the house is mine. The old man's just a formality. He'll be gone soon anyway." Marcus froze. His eyes darted to the corners of the room, searching for the source. Emily gasped, tears forming instantly. "You said that wasn't true." Marcus stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You've been spying on me?" "Spying?" I said quietly. "No. Listening. There's a difference. You've been performing for months, I just decided to record the show." Nolan's voice trembled. "Is it true, Marcus? Did you steal our home?" "Of course not." Marcus barked. "Your father is lying. He's always hated me." "Enough," I said firmly. "Ryan?" A voice from the hallway answered, "Right here." Detective Ryan stepped into the room, holding a folder. His badge caught the candlelight. "Marcus Ellery, we've got a warrant for your arrest, wire fraud, identity theft, and financial coercion." The room fell silent. Marcus's composure cracked. "You think this will stick? You've got nothing." Ryan opened the folder and dropped a series of documents onto the table, bank transfers, falsified deeds, even a Chicago death certificate. "Enough to bury you twice," Ryan said coldly. Marcus's gaze shifted, first to me, then to Nolan. "You think this makes you righteous?" he hissed. "You let me into your home. You believed me. You called me family." I stood slowly, walking around the table until I was standing beside him. "You're right," I said softly. "We did. That's what makes this justice, not revenge." He lunged suddenly, shoving the table aside, sending wine splashing across the floor. Ryan stepped forward, but I was faster. I grabbed Marcus's wrist and twisted, not out of rage, but control. He stumbled back, losing his balance. The edge of the solid oak table met his skull with a dull crack. For a second, the world went silent. Then, he collapsed. Emily screamed. Nolan froze. Ryan rushed to check for a pulse, and then looked up at me. "He's gone." I stood there, staring at the man who had wrecked my family, my finances, and my peace, lying motionless beneath the same table where my humiliation had begun. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ryan spoke carefully. "We'll need statements." But from the looks of it, it was self-defense. I nodded slowly. He finally tripped over his own lies. Hours later, the house was quiet again. The police had come and gone. Marcus's body was taken away, and the cameras removed as evidence. Nolan sat on the steps, staring at his hands. "Dad, it's over. He's really gone." I joined him, lowering myself carefully beside him. "Yes," I said. "But so is the part of us he controlled." He turned to me, his eyes red but clear. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to," I said softly. "Just live honestly. That's how you thank me." He nodded slowly. "Mom would have loved tonight's ending, huh?" I smiled faintly. Maybe not the mess on the floor. We both laughed, a tired, broken laugh that somehow felt healing. Before I left, I stood at the doorway and looked back at the table one last time. The candles had burned low, the wax spilling onto the wood. For a moment, I thought I saw Catherine standing there, just a flicker of her smile in the shadows. "You did it right this time," her voice seemed to say. I whispered, "We did it together." Then I stepped out into the cold October air, closing the door behind me. The night was still alive with laughter and fireworks from the neighborhood kids. But for me, Halloween had finally changed its meaning again. It wasn't about fear anymore. It was about freedom. And as I walked down that quiet street toward my car, I realized revenge hadn't turned me bitter. It had turned me honest. The days after Halloween passed in quiet stillness. The house felt lighter, as though the walls themselves could finally breathe again. Reporters called it an unfortunate accident. The police called it self-defense. But I didn't call it anything. For the first time in a long while, I didn't need to define what happened. I just needed to live with it. Ryan dropped by often, mostly to check in, though he pretended it was just for coffee. "You handled yourself better than most men would have," he said one afternoon, flipping through his notes. I smiled faintly. I wasn't trying to handle it. I was trying to end it. He nodded. "And you did. Every penny's been recovered. The accounts Marcus used are frozen, the house is back under Nolan's name. You won." I looked out the window. Winning's an odd word, Ryan. I don't feel like I won anything. I just stopped losing. He gave a small grin. Maybe that's what real winning looks like. When he left, I walked to the porch, the late autumn air crisp against my face. The maple tree across the yard was shedding its last leaves, each one twisting in slow motion before touching the ground. Nolan came by later that evening with Emily and Harper. For the first time in months, they looked like a family again, unguarded, warm, real. Harper ran straight to me, her laughter slicing through the quiet like sunlight. "Grandpa! Look what I made!" She handed me a small drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands, smiling beneath a house. At the top, in messy crayon letters, she'd written family again. My throat tightened. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Emily smiled softly. "She drew that this morning. Said she wanted you to know everyone's happy again." Nolan stepped forward. "Dad, there's something I want to show you." He pulled out a framed photo, me, Catherine, and a much younger Nolan sitting on a picnic blanket years ago. He set it gently on the table. "Mom used to say that photo reminded her that no matter what happened, we always came back to each other." I looked at it for a long moment. The wind rustled the trees, and for just a second, I swore I could smell Catherine's lavender perfume. "She was right," I said quietly. "We always come back." Later that night, after they left, I sat alone at the dining table. The same table that had once held humiliation, lies, and anger, now clean, calm, and whole again. I ran my hand along its polished edge, remembering every moment that had led me here. Catherine's letter lay on the table beside me. The paper was worn from my hands, but her words were still strong. "Destroy him with truth." She'd been right all along. The truth didn't just destroy him, it rebuilt me. I took a sip of tea, the warmth grounding me. For the first time in years, I felt something that had eluded me through grief, betrayal, and rage, peace. The next morning, I visited Catherine's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the sky painted in soft gray clouds. I knelt, brushing fallen leaves from her headstone. "I did what you asked," I said softly. "I didn't fight with anger this time. I fought with truth." I smiled faintly. "You'd have loved to see his face when it all came crashing down." A breeze swept across the grass, lifting a single leaf that landed at my knee, a small, perfect red maple. It felt like a nod from her, a quiet "well done." On my way home, I stopped by Nolan's office. He was on a call but waved me in. When he hung up, he smiled, really smiled. "Dad, you'll be happy to know something." I've decided to start a small foundation in Mom's name, for people who've been scammed by financial fraud. We're calling it Catherine's Trust. I froze for a second, then felt something warm spread through my chest. She'd like that, I said softly. She'd like that a lot. Nolan leaned back in his chair. You taught me something, Dad. Sometimes strength isn't about fighting harder, it's about standing longer. I placed a hand on his shoulder. And remembering who you're standing for. That night, I took one last look at Catherine's letter before putting it away for good. I folded it carefully and placed it in a small wooden box with her wedding ring and a photo of Nolan as a boy. Then I turned off the light, poured myself a small glass of whiskey, and stepped out onto the porch. The stars were sharp against the black sky, and the air smelled like wood smoke and closure. I thought about Marcus, not with hatred anymore, but with clarity. Some men live their whole lives behind masks. Mine had finally cracked. And in that quiet moment, I realized something: revenge hadn't been the point. It never was. It was about balance. About setting right what had gone wrong, not out of spite, but out of love. I lifted the glass slightly toward the sky. To you, Catherine, I whispered. We're whole again. The wind stirred softly, brushing through the trees like her laughter. And for the first time in years, I truly smiled. The world didn't stop. The pain didn't vanish. But something inside me shifted. The storm that had been raging for so long had finally gone still. Life didn't owe me peace. I'd earned it. Do you think Anthony did the right thing by taking justice into his own hands, or should he have let the law handle it from the start? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.